You see harsh light, which is known to be unflattering for portrait photography. I see directional light, perfect for dramatic portrait. As an engineer turned photographer, I've adopted a methodical approach to my photography that allows me to make sense of the chaos. In this video, I'll share some tips for photographing portraits in harsh light and walk you through my thought process for creating this photo. The first step, scanning the environment. When I walk into a scene, my brain automatically looks for where the light is coming from and where the composition opportunities are. As I was taking portraits of the couple after the ceremony, I noticed all the harsh midday sunlight coming in from the upper windows and lighting this corner of the room. And while many photographers would avoid harsh light for portraits because of the hard shadows that it creates on the face, believe it or not, this is actually my favorite type of light. The key is taking note of the direction of the light. The light here is going from right to left and is slightly less than 45 degrees from horizontal. If the subject is posed carefully, this will make for a dramatic looking portrait. And when it comes to composition, my eye is drawn to this particular framing here due to the juxtaposition of the bright light and the interesting shadows. My plan is to find a pocket of light in between the shadows where I can pose the couple. Making our way down the stairs, I spot check for even lighting with my hand. Then I place the couple in this pocket of light, which is in between the shadow cast by this lamppost and the shadow of the hallway. This composition creates an alternating pattern of light and shadow that is broken up with a couple in the middle. In order to manage the harsh light coming from the right, I direct the bride to look into the light and the groom to look away from the light. This ensures that the light sculpts the front of her face in a flattering way, with the sides of her face falling to shadow. And because it's harsh light, I intentionally frame this photo a bit wider, pulling back for an environmental portrait. Close-up portrait would potentially show all the texture and blemishes in the skin due to the contrasty light. With a wider shot, the couple takes up a smaller portion of the composition, which makes the harsh effect of the skin less obvious and nearly imperceivable to the viewer. I also noticed this reflection of the couple on the floor, so I take out the LCD screen and frame up a low angle shot and expose the image for the highlights. Before I walk you through the exposure settings and the edit for this harsh light portrait, I wanted to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've actually been using Squarespace for over 10 years. Their templates and easy to use interface makes it incredibly simple to create and maintain a professional looking website without any coding experience necessary. My Squarespace website was an essential part of how I built my photography business. It allows me to showcase my portfolio, share recent work on my blog, and ultimately receive inquiries from potential clients through my contact form. If you're one of those photographers relying on your Instagram profile as the sole place to share your work and build your photography business, I would really consider making a website on Squarespace. You can visit squarespace.com/RotuBallesteros to start a free trial and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Here is the unedited RAW file. The settings for this image are 1/640th of a second at aperture of f4 at ISO 160. I chose an aperture of f4.0 as it was the widest aperture on my ultra wide 10 to 24mm zoom lens, but in retrospect, I probably could have stopped down to 5.6 for a little bit more sharpness, as this wasn't actually a low light photo. And my ISO was set to 160 as that is the native ISO of my camera that I was shooting with, the Fujifilm XS10. This leaves the shutter speed, which I set to 1/640th of a second, as that was the setting that exposed my image for the highlights. To explain what exposing for the highlights actually means, let's take a look at the histogram for this image. On the horizontal axis, you have the brightness, and on the vertical axis, you have the number of pixels. Going from left to right, you have the blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. When an image is exposed for the highlights, I'm making sure that none of the highlights are pushing to the extreme right edge of the histogram, which would be a loss of highlight detail, which is called clipping the highlights. The pixels here, which are the wall, the bride's dress, and the bride's face, are exposed in a way to prevent highlight clipping, and ultimately this allows me to have maximum dynamic range data available to me in the final edit. Going back to the raw photo, let's talk about our plan for the edit. With a naturally high contrast scene like this, a beginner photographer might make the mistake of trying to even out the contrast. But reducing the contrast here would actually look a little bit odd and unrealistic. So instead, I'm going to lean into a high contrast moody look in this edit. My plan is to bring back the highlight detail, increase the contrast, and add back a touch of detail to the shadows. But ultimately, I still want to keep the image nice and moody. And the first thing that I'm going to do is apply my Embarcadero preset, which is the more contrasty look. First, we're going to tackle getting the highlight details back. So that's going to be reducing the exposure a little bit right here, and then also reducing the highlights a little bit more. And now I want to bump up the contrast to give it an even more moodier look. And I do want to pop out the details in this area just a little bit, so we're going to increase the shadows. And I don't want to add too much detail in the shadows, because if you do that, it's going to kind of wash out the image a little bit. So I'm going to drop it back to around 60 right here. For this particular image, since it's a pullback image, I want to give it a little bit more texture and clarity. So we're going to increase the texture right here and then add a little bit of clarity. And then it is a little bit too warm for my taste, so I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. And it is a little bit too green, so we're going to bump up the tint just a tad. Gotta finesse that just a little bit. This photo is one of my all-time favorites, and it was only possible because of the harsh light. To leverage the harsh light as a creative tool, we did three things. We found the direction of the harsh light and posed the subject in relation to the light. We took a wider, more pulled back environmental portrait to have the subject take up a smaller portion of the frame, making the harsh light on the face less obvious. And this also allowed me to utilize the light and shadow pattern to make a more interesting composition. Lastly, we didn't fight the high contrast look in the edit, but instead embraced it, exposing the image for the highlights and keeping the shadows nice and dark with a touch of detail. At the end of the day, there is no right or wrong way to photography. There is only your way. But I hope that me sharing how I see and approach using harsh light for portraits will empower you to experiment more with harsh light for your photography. If you have any questions about what I covered in this video, leave them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. I've also included a link to my photography course, the Light and Lines Photography Bootcamp, if you'd like to continue learning about my methodical approach to lighting and composition. And don't forget to like and subscribe, as it lets me know that you want to see more of these types of videos in the future.